The air was thick with tension as the family gathered in the grand dining room. The chandeliers above cast their soft glow on the polished wood, but beneath the elegance of the setting, an unseen storm was brewing. There was a particular stillness that filled the space, the kind of quiet before a storm, when everyone knew something was wrong but no one dared to speak it. And then, the woman who had been the center of it all, Marcus Hale's wife, Gloria, walked in, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She was the picture of grace, her poised demeanor hiding the venom that dripped from her every word. No one could deny that she was stunning, the epitome of high society. But her beauty wasn't what had captured attention that night. It was the cruel way she had humiliated someone who had been a part of Marcus's life long before she had ever entered the picture, his childhood nanny, Martha. Martha had always been a quiet presence in the Hale household, a kind soul who had cared for Marcus when his own parents were too busy to notice him. She had raised him when no one else would, nurturing him with love and discipline, and he had always been grateful. That was, until Gloria came into the picture. From the moment she married Marcus, Gloria had never made an effort to understand Martha, to appreciate the bond she shared with Marcus. It wasn't until the family gathered that evening that the full extent of Gloria's disdain would be revealed. It started with an innocent comment, one that seemed harmless at first. Gloria had invited Martha over for dinner, but as soon as she walked into the room, her tone shifted. The warmth she had once shown towards the woman who had helped raise her husband was now gone. Gloria's eyes, once warm and welcoming, now pierced through Martha like daggers. The condescending smile on her face didn't fool anyone. "I can't believe you still dress like that," Gloria had said, her voice dripping with disdain as she looked at Martha's modest outfit. The jab was sharp, cutting through the room, and everyone could feel the weight of it. "It's 2025, not 1985. Surely, you've updated your wardrobe since then." Martha, who had always been a woman of few words, seemed taken aback by the comment. She had never been one to care for fashion, her focus had always been on the family. She had raised Marcus with love and without expectation, and she never sought the spotlight. But as the dinner continued, Gloria's remarks became more pointed, more cruel. She ridiculed the way Martha spoke, the way she moved, even the way she looked at Marcus. It was as if she was determined to tear down the woman who had once been a mother figure to her husband. But what Gloria didn't know was that Marcus had been watching quietly from the sidelines. He'd been silent for most of the evening, observing the cruelty unfolding in front of him. The more Gloria insulted Martha, the more something inside him stirred. The woman he had married, the woman he had chosen to stand by his side, was not the person he thought she was. Gloria's arrogance, her disregard for the people who had been there for him, was more than he could ignore. Marcus had always been a man of patience, but there were limits. Gloria's behavior, her ability to humiliate Martha without any remorse, had crossed a line that he could never have anticipated. He had grown up learning the value of loyalty and respect, values that had been instilled in him by the woman sitting across the table from him now. The fact that Gloria, with all her wealth and beauty, could not understand the significance of Martha in his life was something he couldn't reconcile. As the evening drew to a close, Gloria made one last comment that would prove to be the breaking point. "It's no wonder you never married," she sneered, eyes flicking toward Martha's lonely figure. "Who would want a woman who dresses like a grandmother and speaks like she's still in the past? I'm sure Marcus is relieved he doesn't have to be burdened with someone like you anymore." It was the final insult, and in that moment, Marcus made up his mind. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, drawing everyone's attention. All eyes turned to him as he looked down at Gloria, his face unreadable. The room fell silent, the weight of what was about to happen hanging heavily in the air. Enough, Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with an authority that was impossible to ignore. He turned to Gloria, his gaze sharp, his disappointment clear. You don't get to treat the people I love like that. Martha was here long before you, and she will be here long after. If you can't respect that, then maybe you don't belong here at all. The words hit Gloria like a slap in the face. She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. The smug look she'd worn all evening faded, replaced by confusion and disbelief. Marcus didn't wait for her to speak. Instead, he turned to the rest of the family, who were all sitting in stunned silence, and made a decision that would change everything. I've made my decision, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. This family needs to know what really matters. I'm taking action. The room erupted into chaos. Gloria stood frozen, her face a mix of shock and anger, while Martha's eyes widened in disbelief. No one could have predicted what Marcus was about to do, and as the scene unfolded, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus's next move would leave the entire family reeling, and no one could have anticipated the consequences of his decision. As he walked out of the room, leaving behind a stunned and speechless Gloria, the weight of his actions hung in the air. What had started as a simple dinner had now turned into a battle for control, respect, and loyalty. And Marcus was ready to fight for it all, no matter the cost. But just as everyone was trying to process what had happened, Marcus's final words rang in their ears, echoing through the silence. This isn't over. And with that, the tension that had been building all evening snapped, leaving everyone on edge, wondering what Marcus's next move would be. Would he stand by his decision? Or would his family fall apart under the pressure of what had just transpired? The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome was uncertain. All they knew for sure was that Marcus was no longer the man they thought they knew. The game had changed, and no one knew who would come out on top. The silence that followed Marcus's words seemed to stretch on forever. Everyone in the room held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Gloria stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape, struggling to process what had just transpired. Her entire world had just been shaken, and for the first time in years, she was left speechless. Martha, on the other hand, was trying to understand the weight of Marcus's words, her heart racing as the realization of what had just happened sank in. For years, Martha had watched as Gloria took her place in the Hale family, first as a girlfriend, then as a wife. She had always known there was something about Gloria that rubbed her the wrong way. It wasn't the wealth or the status that bothered her. It was the lack of respect, the way Gloria dismissed the people who had been there for Marcus since he was a child. Martha had spent so many years taking care of him, nurturing him when his parents were too busy with their businesses and the pressures of their social standing. And now, it felt like everything she had done, every sacrifice she had made, was being minimized in front of her eyes. Gloria's reaction to Marcus's words was a mixture of confusion and anger. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Marcus, her husband, the man she had spent years trying to control, was standing there, making it clear that he wasn't going to let her tear apart the people who had built his life. The thought that she might lose her place in the family over a comment about Martha's appearance was unfathomable to her. Gloria had always been the center of attention, always used her charm and beauty to manipulate those around her. But Marcus wasn't falling for it anymore. And that realization shook Gloria to her core. Martha, however, felt a strange mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She had always seen Marcus as a son, someone she had raised with love and care. To hear him stand up for her in such a public way, to witness him finally speak out against Gloria's cruelty, left her feeling conflicted. On one hand, she felt deeply honored, grateful for his support. But on the other hand, she knew this was a dangerous game Marcus was playing. Gloria wouldn't take this humiliation lightly. And when Gloria fought back, it wasn't going to be with kindness. The tension in the room hung like a heavy fog, the unease almost palpable. Marcus's decision had shifted the balance of power in the household, but at what cost? No one knew. Gloria wasn't just his wife, she was a force in her own right, with connections, resources, and a tenacity that could rival any businessman. If she felt threatened, she would fight tooth and nail to regain control. The family, the staff, everyone who had witnessed the scene, now knew they were standing at the precipice of something much larger than a simple disagreement. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the house became charged. Gloria, for the first time, seemed to retreat into herself, her once confident exterior cracking under the weight of Marcus's words. But that didn't mean she was backing down. If anything, she was only getting more determined to reclaim her position. Every morning, she would quietly retreat to her study, her mind racing with plans and schemes. Gloria was not a woman who let her reputation be tarnished, especially not by someone she saw as inferior, like Martha. Meanwhile, Marcus spent his days locked away in his office, his mind wrestling with the decision he had made. Part of him knew it was the right thing to do. He had watched Gloria belittle Martha for too long, and it had reached a breaking point. But the other part of him was uncertain. He had always prided himself on being a businessman who saw the bigger picture. He knew the consequences of alienating his wife, especially one as powerful as Gloria. His childhood memories of Martha were filled with warmth and affection. She had been a constant in his life, someone he could always rely on. She had guided him through his darkest moments, and when his parents were too busy with their own lives, she was the one who showed him love and patience. Martha had been a mother to him in every sense of the word, and Gloria's cruel treatment of her was unforgivable in his eyes. But the tension between Marcus and Gloria was growing. They hadn't spoken much since the dinner. Gloria was cold, distant, and kept to herself, while Marcus found himself unable to shake the feeling that he had made a huge mistake. He had never imagined that standing up for Martha would lead to such a deep rift between him and his wife. He hadn't expected Gloria to react the way she did, but now, it seemed as though their marriage was on the brink of collapse. One evening, Marcus received a call that would change everything. It was from his lawyer. The tone of the conversation was urgent, and it immediately piqued his curiosity. The conversation was brief, but the message was clear: Gloria was planning to file for divorce. She was ready to walk away from their marriage, and she had already taken the first steps to secure her future. Marcus was shocked. He hadn't expected things to escalate this quickly. Gloria wasn't the type of woman to back down, but he hadn't anticipated that she would take such drastic action. As the lawyer hung up, Marcus sat there in stunned silence. The weight of what was happening was beginning to sink in. The family he had worked so hard to build, the empire he had spent years cultivating, was now on the edge of falling apart. Gloria wasn't just taking a stand for herself, she was going to war, and she wasn't afraid to use every tool at her disposal. The fight for control had just begun, and Marcus realized that his next move would determine the future of everything he held dear. The following morning, Marcus called Martha to his office. He needed to speak with her, to explain what was happening. She arrived promptly, her face calm but her eyes filled with worry. The bond between them was undeniable, and Marcus could see the concern etched on her face. "I never wanted it to come to this," Marcus began, his voice heavy with regret. "But Gloria isn't going to let this go. She's planning to leave, and I have to figure out how to protect what's mine." Martha nodded silently, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what was at stake. She had always known that the power dynamics in the Hale family were fragile, but she never imagined it would come to this. As Marcus spoke, she realized that their lives, their futures, were now intertwined in a way they could never have anticipated. With every passing hour, the tension grew. Gloria was preparing for battle, and Marcus knew he had to act fast. But what could he do? His wealth, his power, and his position in society were all at risk. The only thing he had left was his integrity. Would it be enough to protect everything he had fought for? The days after Marcus's conversation with Martha passed in a blur. The weight of the decision he had made, the fear of what could happen if things escalated further, loomed over him like a dark cloud. The once calm and controlled environment of his home had transformed into a battleground, each person in the family choosing their side, unsure of what would come next. Gloria, though outwardly quiet, had begun preparing her defense. She wasn't one to back down, especially not when her position of power was threatened. Every move she made now was calculated, every word she spoke carefully measured. She knew the game she was playing, and she wasn't going to lose without a fight. But even as she plotted, a small seed of doubt began to sprout in her mind. Marcus's words had cut deeper than she'd let on. No one had ever dared challenge her like that, especially not Marcus. But Gloria wasn't one to show weakness. She would strike back, she had to. Meanwhile, Martha's presence in the house grew more uncomfortable with each passing day. She had always been a constant in Marcus's life, someone he could turn to for guidance and comfort. But now, it felt as though the very air around her was thick with uncertainty. Her bond with Marcus, though strong, was beginning to put her in a precarious position. She had been the caretaker, the one who had raised him, but now she found herself caught in a conflict that she had never anticipated. The woman she had once regarded as a daughter-in-law was now a threat to everything she held dear. Martha could sense the growing tension between the two women, and though she longed for peace, she knew that would never come as long as Gloria was in the picture. As the days passed, Marcus became more withdrawn. The constant tension at home was wearing him down. Every time he walked into a room, he felt the heavy gaze of his wife, the silent judgment of the woman he had spent years building a life with. But it wasn't just Gloria's presence that bothered him, it was the weight of the decisions he had made. He knew he had done the right thing standing up for Martha, but it had come at a great cost. His marriage, which had always seemed solid, now hung in the balance. The once firm foundation was cracked, and no matter how much he tried to patch it up, the cracks seemed to widen. Marcus spent hours in his office, trying to focus on his work, but the words Gloria had said to him echoed in his mind. This isn't over. The more he thought about it, the more it haunted him. He knew Gloria wasn't just going to walk away quietly, but what was her next move? And would Marcus be prepared for the fallout when it came? In the quiet of the house, Martha and Marcus's paths crossed more frequently. Though the house felt more divided than ever, they found solace in each other's company. Martha understood him in a way no one else could. She had been there for him when his parents were absent, when he needed someone to lean on. Now, it seemed like the roles had reversed. She had always been the caretaker, but now, she was the one who needed protection. And Marcus was determined to give it to her. But the longer the tension dragged on, the more it became clear that something was going to have to give. Every phone call, every meeting, every conversation seemed to draw them closer to the breaking point. Gloria had already begun making moves behind the scenes. She had reached out to her lawyer, started making plans for what her life would look like without Marcus. She had already spoken to friends in high places, setting the stage for her departure from the family, but no one knew just how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, Marcus was forced to make a decision. Would he fight for his marriage and risk everything he had worked for, or would he side with the woman who had always been there for him? He knew that if Gloria left, his life would be forever changed. His wealth, his status, and his future would all be up for grabs. And yet, the thought of standing by a woman who had no regard for the people who had helped him become who he was troubled him deeply. The tension in the house continued to build, and everyone could feel the impending explosion. Each day felt like a countdown, the seconds ticking away until everything would unravel. It wasn't just about the two women anymore, it was about everything Marcus had worked for, everything he had built. The stakes were higher than they had ever been before, and Marcus knew that whatever happened next would change the course of his life forever. One evening, just as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the estate, Marcus received a call that would alter everything. It was his lawyer again. His heart sank as he listened, his mind racing with thoughts of what Gloria was planning now. "She's not just asking for a divorce," the lawyer said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "She's contesting the will. She's claiming that she's entitled to everything." Marcus's blood ran cold. Gloria wasn't just seeking a divorce, she was going after his entire empire. All the years of hard work, the legacy he had built, everything he had fought for, was now at risk. Gloria had found a way to turn the tables, and Marcus wasn't prepared for the war that was about to ensue. The news left Marcus reeling. He had known that Gloria was ruthless, but he never imagined she would go so far. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a battle for everything he held dear. And if he wasn't careful, he could lose it all. The days that followed were filled with sleepless nights and endless strategy sessions. Marcus met with his lawyer, trying to find a way to protect his assets, his business, and his legacy. But it seemed like every move he made was met with a new challenge. Gloria was always one step ahead. She had her own set of connections, her own set of resources, and Marcus was starting to realize just how powerful she truly was. Meanwhile, Martha watched from the sidelines, feeling more like an outsider with each passing day. She knew Marcus was fighting for his future, but she couldn't help but wonder where she fit into all of this. She had always been loyal to Marcus, but now, she was caught between two powerful forces. Her heart ached for him, but she knew she couldn't fight Gloria's battle for him. All she could do was stand by his side, offering the support and loyalty she had always shown. The stakes had never been higher. As the legal battle began to take shape, Marcus knew one thing for sure: Gloria wasn't going to back down, and neither would he. This was no longer just about a marriage or a family, it was about survival. And in this game, only one person would come out on top. The days leading up to the court date felt like a slow burn, each one stretching the tension tighter and tighter. The house, once filled with the hum of daily life, had become eerily quiet. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. Every room felt like a battlefield, with Marcus at the center, trying to hold everything together as his marriage and future teetered on the edge of destruction. Gloria, meanwhile, seemed colder than ever, her every move calculated, her every word sharp as a knife. She wasn't just fighting for a divorce, she was fighting to take everything Marcus had worked for. And he knew it. In the days before the hearing, Marcus found himself alone in his office more and more often, staring at the legal documents scattered across his desk. He knew that every decision, every choice he made now would either save him or destroy everything he had built. His empire, his wealth, his status, it all hung in the balance. But no matter how much he tried to focus, his thoughts always drifted back to Martha. She was the one person who had always been there for him, who had given him unconditional support. But now, as the legal battle grew more intense, he couldn't help but feel that he was pushing her away. She had always been a quiet strength in his life, but he had never fully understood the weight of what she had carried for so long, until now. And as Gloria's attacks grew more vicious, Marcus realized that Martha might be the only person left he could trust. The media had caught wind of the family's turmoil, and soon the stories about Marcus and Gloria were splashed across tabloids, each headline more sensational than the last. It seemed like every day there was a new rumor, a new leak, and the pressure from the outside world was mounting. The public had always adored the Hale family, fascinated by their wealth and power, but now the cracks were showing. The world was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. And Gloria wasn't about to let the world forget her name. Every time Marcus tried to reach out to her, to settle things quietly before the court hearing, she would refuse. She was determined to go to war, and it seemed like she had already mapped out every strategy. Each time Marcus thought he had a handle on the situation, Gloria would strike from a new angle, her moves as unpredictable as they were calculated. She was an expert in manipulation, and she was using everything at her disposal to break Marcus down. As the court date drew closer, Marcus felt himself slipping further and further from the man he once was. He couldn't focus. He couldn't think clearly. It felt as if the walls were closing in on him from all sides. He wasn't just fighting for his marriage, he was fighting for his entire identity. Gloria's relentless pursuit of control, combined with the media frenzy and the strain of the legal battle, had begun to chip away at the very foundation of his life. The man who once commanded attention with his presence now found himself struggling to keep his head above water. Martha, too, felt the weight of the situation. She could see how much Marcus was suffering. The man she had helped raise, the man she had once watched grow into a confident and capable individual, was now a shadow of himself. She had always known that his relationship with Gloria was fraught with tension, but she had never imagined it would come to this. The stakes were higher than ever, and now, Martha found herself standing on the precipice, unsure of how far things would go. But in the quiet moments, when the world wasn't watching, there were still moments of connection between Marcus and Martha. Late at night, when the house had settled into an uneasy silence, they would sit together, talking about everything and nothing at all. Those were the moments that kept Marcus grounded, the moments when he felt like he wasn't alone. And though he didn't say it aloud, he knew that without Martha's support, he wouldn't have made it this far. One evening, just days before the court hearing, Marcus and Martha found themselves sitting in the living room, the weight of the situation pressing down on them both. Marcus looked at her, his eyes weary, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to speak honestly. "I don't know what's going to happen next, Martha," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've fought for everything I have, and now I'm watching it slip away. I don't even know who I am anymore." Martha reached out, placing a hand gently on his. "You're the same person you've always been, Marcus," she said softly. "You're the man who worked hard, who built this family, this business. You're the man who cares about the people in his life. That's who you are." He met her gaze, and for a brief moment, the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. But that relief was fleeting. The next day, things took a turn for the worse. Gloria, never one to shy away from making a spectacle of herself, showed up at the family estate with a camera crew in tow. The media storm that followed was unprecedented. Gloria had strategically timed her appearance, knowing it would dominate the news cycle. The cameras flashed as she walked into the house with an air of defiance, her head held high, the perfect image of a woman ready to reclaim her life. The headlines the next morning were a nightmare for Marcus. Millionaire's wife takes over family business amid divorce drama. Gloria Hale's power play, the battle for control of the Hale legacy begins. The public scrutiny was unbearable. It was clear that Gloria was not backing down. She was playing her cards, and she was playing them well. As the court date loomed ever closer, Marcus knew he couldn't let Gloria win. But with every move she made, the situation seemed to spiral further out of his control. The media buzzed, his business was in jeopardy, and his marriage had already fallen apart. What could he do to stop the bleeding? His only option now was to fight back. But as the courtroom date grew nearer, Marcus began to wonder if there was anyone left to stand by him. Would Martha continue to support him when everything around them crumbled, or would she, too, be swept away by the storm Gloria had set in motion? The uncertainty gnawed at him. He knew the stakes had never been higher. Gloria was playing for keeps, and if he didn't make the right move, he could lose everything. The tension reached a fever pitch, and Marcus realized that in just a few days, his fate would be sealed. Would the man who had spent his life building an empire be reduced to nothing? Or would he find a way to turn the tide, to take back control and prove that not even Gloria could destroy him? As the court date approached, everything seemed to hinge on one final, crucial moment. The weight of Marcus's decisions, the intensity of the conflict, and the stakes of the battle that was about to unfold made the entire situation feel like it was teetering on the edge of a cliff. The question that lingered in the air was clear. Who would come out on top when the dust finally settled? The night before the court date, Marcus couldn't sleep. His mind was racing, unable to settle on anything, bouncing between thoughts of the business, the media, and the unraveling of his personal life. The weight of it all felt unbearable. He had spent years building a life he was proud of, but now, with every decision, he was inching closer to losing it all. The thought of losing his family, his legacy, and everything he had worked for stung more than he cared to admit. It was well past midnight when the phone rang. He glanced at the screen, expecting it to be his lawyer, but when he saw the caller ID, his heart sank. It was Martha. He hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what new development was waiting on the other end of the line. "Marcus, we need to talk." Martha's voice was strained, as if she had been holding something back for a long time. "It's about Gloria. She's been making deals behind your back." His pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What's going on?" "Marcus, you have to listen carefully," Martha continued, her tone low and urgent. "Gloria, she's not just after the divorce settlement. She's been talking to your business partners, some of your closest allies, and she's managed to secure their loyalty. She's planning to take control of the company, and she's using your family's legacy as leverage." Marcus froze, his mind racing. The idea that Gloria had already started making deals, securing alliances with his partners he trusted, was beyond anything he had imagined. He had always known that Gloria had a ruthless side, but this was next level. The stakes had just been raised higher than he could have ever anticipated. If Gloria was already making moves behind his back, it meant that the court date wasn't just about settling a divorce, it was about securing control of everything he had worked for. It was a battle for his very future, one that he had no choice but to fight with everything he had left. "How do you know all of this?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with a mix of disbelief and growing anger. "I overheard her conversation with one of your partners," Martha confessed. "She was making promises of power, control, and even more wealth in exchange for their loyalty. She's not planning to walk away quietly, Marcus. She's planning to destroy you." Marcus sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, his mind reeling. The enormity of what Martha had just told him was too much to process. How had Gloria managed to get so many people on her side? He had always believed his business and his family were untouchable, but now it seemed like everything was falling apart before his eyes. What was he supposed to do now? If he didn't act quickly, he could lose not only his marriage but his entire empire. "I don't know what to do, Martha," Marcus admitted, his voice strained with frustration. "I've been fighting for so long, and it feels like every time I take a step forward, she finds a way to drag me 2 steps back." Martha was quiet for a moment before speaking softly. "You have to make your move now, Marcus. You can't wait any longer. Gloria's planning her next attack, and she's already got the advantage." The urgency in her voice broke through Marcus's clouded thoughts. She was right, Gloria had already positioned herself and made alliances. If he waited any longer, it could be too late. His empire, his legacy, everything he had built could slip through his fingers in the blink of an eye. He had to act, and he had to do it quickly. The call ended with a promise to meet early the next morning before the court hearing. As Marcus hung up, his mind was a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. He knew one thing for sure, he couldn't let Gloria win. Not this time. The next morning, Marcus met Martha in the kitchen, the sunlight barely breaking through the curtains. Her face was drawn with concern, but there was a determination in her eyes that Marcus hadn't seen before. She had always been the quiet strength in his life, but now, he could see that she was willing to fight alongside him in a way he hadn't expected. "I've been thinking," Martha said, her voice steady but filled with a new energy. "If Gloria has already secured support from your business partners, then it's time to fight fire with fire. We need to expose her tactics. We need to make it public, get ahead of the narrative before she can take control of everything." Marcus nodded slowly. He hadn't considered going public with the situation. But Martha was right. If he could expose Gloria's manipulation and deceit, it could sway the public opinion in his favor. It wouldn't be easy, but it might be his best shot. And more importantly, it would give him the upper hand in the battle that was about to unfold. "I'll do whatever it takes," Marcus said, his voice firm. "I'm not letting her take everything. Not without a fight." As they talked, plans began to form, each one more daring than the last. They knew the risk, they knew the power Gloria wielded, but they also knew that without taking action, they would lose everything. The battle lines had been drawn, and now, it was a fight for survival. Little did Marcus know, Gloria was already making her own moves. Just as he and Martha were preparing their counterattack, Gloria had set a trap that would shake everything Marcus thought he knew about his business and his family. She had known Marcus would try to fight back. She had always been 2 steps ahead, and her next move would be the one that would test Marcus's resolve. Gloria's plan was already set in motion. She had arranged a secret meeting with a major investor, someone who could sway the direction of the company in her favor. Marcus didn't know about it, but Martha did. She had been following Gloria's every move, and now, she realized just how deep the web of manipulation had become. Gloria had placed her pieces on the chessboard, and she wasn't about to let anyone knock her out of the game. The moment of truth was fast approaching. The court hearing would happen in just a few hours, and Marcus knew it was now or never. Gloria was preparing to fight dirty, and it was clear that the conflict had reached a point of no return. What Marcus didn't know, though, was that Gloria's most unexpected move was already in play. The game was about to change in a way no one could predict, and Marcus would have to act fast, because if he didn't, everything he held dear could be lost forever. As the morning sun filtered through the windows, Marcus and Martha knew that today was the day that would decide everything. The court hearing was just hours away, and Marcus had already made his move. He had sent out a press release to the media, detailing Gloria's manipulation and the deals she had been making behind his back. The story was out, the public was watching, and the courtroom battle was about to begin. He was nervous, yes, but there was a new fire inside him. He wasn't just fighting for his family anymore, he was fighting for his future, for his legacy. The tension in the air as Marcus entered the courtroom was palpable. His legal team was ready, and so was Gloria. She sat across from him, her face impassive, her eyes cold. The papers had already made her a villain in the eyes of many, but she was prepared to spin the narrative, to reclaim the power she had been losing. It was a battle of wills now, one that would determine everything. The judge called for the proceedings to begin, and the room fell into a heavy silence. The back and forth between the lawyers was expected, arguments were made, evidence was presented, and each side tried to outmaneuver the other. Marcus's heart raced as he listened to Gloria's lawyer, who was quick to twist the facts, turning the story in her favor. The courtroom was on edge, waiting for the final blow. But what no one could have anticipated was the twist that was about to unfold. Just as the judge was preparing to make a ruling, a new figure entered the courtroom, a man with a briefcase, walking briskly to the front. He wasn't someone anyone recognized, and his sudden appearance threw everyone off. Gloria's lawyer shot a glance at her, but she remained stoic, as though she knew exactly what was coming. The man stood before the judge, and in a calm, steady voice, he spoke. "Your Honor, I have a piece of crucial evidence that changes everything." The entire room went silent. Marcus's mind raced. What could this be? What kind of evidence could turn the tide now? The man opened his briefcase and pulled out a set of documents. "These are copies of legal contracts," he said, his eyes scanning the room, signed by both Marcus Hale and Gloria Hale. "But there's a catch, the signatures on these contracts were forged." The shock in the room was immediate. Marcus blinked, his throat tightening. Forged? He didn't know what was happening, but his entire world seemed to spin. The man continued, explaining how someone had carefully forged both their signatures on a set of documents that would allow Gloria to take control of Marcus's empire, making it appear as if Marcus had willingly handed over the reins of the company. Gloria's face turned white, and for the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. She was caught off guard. The documents were real, but the signatures were false. The man revealed that it had been an inside job, someone from within the company had been working with Gloria all along, and they had orchestrated the entire thing. This wasn't just about a divorce, it was about an elaborate scheme to steal everything Marcus had worked for. Gloria's attempt to take control of the company wasn't just motivated by money, it was a calculated move to seize power and destroy Marcus in the process. As the pieces began to fall into place, Marcus's mind raced. The plot had been deeper than he could have ever imagined. He had been set up, played like a pawn in a game that was more sinister than he realized. And the shocking part? The man with the briefcase wasn't just some random stranger, he was a private investigator hired by Martha. She had been investigating Gloria's past actions for months, quietly gathering evidence, and now, everything was coming to light. Martha, who had always been the quiet, supportive figure in Marcus's life, had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, making sure that the truth would come out. Her quiet strength had been the key to Marcus's survival. It wasn't just about saving his company, it was about exposing the lies and protecting the legacy of the Hale family. With the new evidence on the table, the room erupted into chaos. Gloria's lawyer tried to salvage the situation, but it was clear that the tide had turned. The judge asked Gloria to explain herself, but she was speechless. The man who had entered the courtroom with the documents had just dismantled everything she had been trying to build. Gloria, the woman who had spent years plotting and manipulating, was now cornered, unable to escape the truth. As the proceedings continued, Marcus could feel the weight lifting off his shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in what felt like forever, he had the upper hand. Gloria's grip on the company was slipping, and her reputation, carefully built over the years, was crumbling in front of the world. The media, who had once been her ally, were now turning on her. The story of her deceit was unfolding live in the courtroom, and the public was watching with bated breath. But just when Marcus thought the worst was over, there was another unexpected twist. The private investigator stepped forward again, this time holding a final document. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice steady. "I've traced the origins of the forged documents. And I have reason to believe that Gloria wasn't acting alone. Someone from Marcus's inner circle was involved in the plot to frame him." The revelation hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had trusted the people around him, the ones he had thought were loyal. But now, it seemed that betrayal ran deeper than he could have ever imagined. The private investigator went on to reveal that one of Marcus's closest allies had been working with Gloria, feeding her information, and helping her orchestrate the entire scheme. The betrayal was personal, and it stung in ways Marcus couldn't fully comprehend. As the judge called for a recess, the room buzzed with conversation. Marcus sat back in his chair, his mind reeling from the revelation. Not only had Gloria tried to ruin him, but she had also had help from someone within his inner circle. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, and the weight of it felt like a crushing blow. But even as the truth came to light, Marcus knew that the battle wasn't over yet. He had won a significant victory, but the war was far from over. He still had to confront the person who had betrayed him, someone he had trusted. And while he knew he had the evidence to win, the emotional toll was greater than he had anticipated. As he glanced over at Martha, who had been his silent strength through it all, Marcus realized that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But at least now, he had a chance. And with the truth on his side, he was ready to fight for everything he had left. As the courtroom buzzed with conversations and whispers, Marcus sat motionless, absorbing the weight of what had just been revealed. The depth of betrayal was something he had never fully anticipated. He had trusted the people closest to him, those he had considered family, and yet here he was, sitting in a room where everything he had worked for had been undermined by those he thought were loyal. The private investigator's revelation about the person within his own company who had been aiding Gloria was a bitter pill to swallow. It was hard to fathom that someone from his inner circle, someone who had sat at his table and shared his vision, had actively worked against him. Marcus's mind raced through his employees, trying to figure out who could have betrayed him, but no name immediately came to mind. Whoever it was, they had been skilled at hiding their tracks. As the recess ended, Marcus had no choice but to step up and confront the situation head-on. The media was on high alert, reporters eager to cover every twist in the saga. What had started as a messy divorce case had now turned into a full-blown corporate battle, with the fate of Marcus's empire hanging in the balance. The room was still charged with the tension of the previous revelations, and the judge called for order as the proceedings resumed. The judge, having seen the overwhelming evidence, was ready to make a ruling. But before that, Gloria, who had remained largely silent through the proceedings, stood up. Her demeanor had shifted, gone was the confident, calculating woman who had once controlled the narrative. Now, she looked smaller, defeated. "Your Honor," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I want to withdraw my claims." The room fell silent. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this, not after everything. Gloria's eyes flicked toward Marcus, but there was no hint of the smugness that had once defined her. Instead, there was a quiet resignation. She had lost in the battle for the company, and lost in the battle for the truth. "I made mistakes," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I got caught up in the power. I thought I could control everything. I thought I could fix it all, but now I see that I was wrong." Marcus watched her carefully, trying to read the emotion behind her words. Was she really admitting guilt, or was this just another manipulation? Yet, as he looked at her, he saw something unfamiliar, a glimmer of vulnerability. It was clear that Gloria was a woman whose entire life had been built on control, on power. And in that moment, she had lost both. The judge nodded, and the court proceedings continued. It didn't take long for the judge to issue his ruling. Marcus had won. The divorce was finalized, and Gloria's claims to the business were dismissed. As for the betrayal within Marcus's company, that would be investigated further, but the damage had already been done. Gloria's role in the conspiracy had been exposed, and she would face consequences for her actions, though not the way she had initially planned. The relief that washed over Marcus was palpable, but it was mixed with a profound sense of loss. The woman he had loved for so many years, the woman he had once built a life with, was now a stranger. The family he had fought to protect, the legacy he had worked so hard to create, had been torn apart by deception and greed. It wasn't just a business he had fought for, it was everything. And now, that part of his life was over. But amid the devastation, there was a flicker of hope. Marcus had his company back, and he had been given a second chance to rebuild. This time, though, he knew he couldn't do it alone. He had learned the hard way that power and control were fragile things, and trusting the wrong people could cost everything. The next phase of his life would require more than just business acumen, it would require a stronger foundation, one built on honesty and trust. As Marcus left the courtroom, the weight of the day's events hung heavily on his shoulders. He walked with Martha, who had been by his side throughout this entire ordeal, her quiet strength and loyalty a constant presence when everything else seemed to be falling apart. It was clear to him now that while Gloria had been a source of turmoil in his life, it was Martha who had been the anchor, the one person who never wavered, never faltered in her support. "Marcus," Martha said softly, breaking the silence. "You did it. You survived. And now, you can start over." He turned to her, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I couldn't have done it without you, Martha. You were the one who made sure the truth came out. You were the one who never gave up." Martha smiled back, her eyes warm with affection. "It's what friends do." The two of them shared a quiet moment, the kind of connection that transcends words. In that instant, Marcus realized that while his empire was important, it was the people around him who truly mattered. It was their loyalty, their honesty, and their support that would shape the future. He couldn't afford to make the same mistakes again. As the days passed, Marcus worked hard to rebuild both his company and his life. He took steps to restore the trust that had been shattered, not just in his business, but in his relationships as well. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, was hard to repair. But with determination and the lessons he had learned from the betrayal, he started to lay the foundation for a new era, one that would be based on transparency and integrity. And as for Gloria, she faded from the public eye. Her plans had been destroyed, her power dismantled. The empire she had tried to take from Marcus was now firmly in his hands, but it was no longer just a business to him. It was a symbol of survival, a reminder that no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how dark the days, there was always a way forward. The story of Marcus Hale, once a tale of wealth and power, had turned into a lesson about trust, resilience, and the importance of the people who stood by you when everything else seemed lost. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there could be light, and that sometimes, the most unexpected people would be the ones who helped you find your way back.